Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Liturgy of the Chalice. Today we are going to continue our discussion about the Gospel of Matthew. This is part 8 of a series. So the last time that we discussed the Beatitudes, it was some time ago because we had a little bit of a spiritual sabbatical going on, and then a few other things came up in our discussions. But now we're coming back to the Gospel of Matthew. And this continues the second and third Beatitudes from the Gospel of Matthew. Understanding the Beatitudes is very important because a lot of people see these Beatitudes as blessings of Jesus to the people or proclamations of something, like if you do this, you're going to get that. And that's not what it was. Jesus was a prophet. He identified as a prophet. Think back to the Gospel of Mark, where he said that, prophets are not accepted in their own cities, in their own neighborhoods. He was referring to himself when they kicked him out of the synagogue. So Jesus identified as a prophet. He was also a Rav, a Jewish master, which was the preceding idea to a rabbi, because rabbis didn't come into existence until after 70 AD, when the Second Temple fell, and truly the Jewish religion became a religion of the book in synagogues, because there was no longer any temple worship or temple sacrifice, etc. But the Beatitudes are not blessings. They were prophecies of the coming Son of Mankind, collective Messiah. Jesus said, the season has come. The season has come. The kingdom of God, or the Malkuth of God, the kingship of God, as we translate it, is near. Make a return to the way of God. Embody the teachings of Torah. And have fidelity to my proclamation. So the season has come. The age has come, however they translate it. What is this season that Jesus said was coming? This season was the Messianic age. Jesus determined that when he made that proclamation, his basor, that the Messianic age was coming into place. The Messiah would come, and there would be birth pangs. And Jesus indicated a prophecy of the fall of the Second Temple as being a sign that Messiah would begin showing on earth. And Messiah wasn't the Davidic Messiah. Messiah was the collective, anointed, new humanity. Everybody is born as part of the first Adam. We all lack awareness of God. We all have selfish tendencies. We all have negative tendencies. We don't follow the way of God, even imperfectly. But Jesus came to say, if you follow my halakha, which is my revolutionary interpretation of Torah, if you do what I teach, and you do the Torah, you could experience a second birth, a rebirth, a spiritual birth from above. You'll be anointed by God, and you'll become part of a great communion of saints, of other beings that have purified their hearts and minds. And these beings share the Malkuth, which is the kingship of God, the sovereignty of God, the rulership of God. You have a part of that divine power is inherited when you experience spiritual rebirth. And then you become responsible to one degree or another for shaping the spiritualized future of humanity, the spiritual evolution of earth. And these Beatitudes, if understood properly, are prophecies of the fulfillment of this messianic age that Jesus said the season has arrived. The Malkuth has come. When one experiences spiritual rebirth, they are gifted by God, Malkuth, co-sovereignty over all of the earth. They become leaders, spiritual leaders of humanity. And this is the true understanding of the Beatitudes. So the Beatitudes were not blessings, but prophecies of the coming Son of Mankind, collective Messiah, that each human being, though born in the first Adam, can become spiritually reborn into the second Adam, which is a communion of saints. The Messiah was not one person, but each of us are meant to become anointed by God to serve a greater purpose. Jesus was the so-called firstborn of this Son of Mankind, collective Messiah. But we are each meant to embody in thought, word, and deed the teachings of Jesus. And by doing so, we purify our hearts and our minds. We have an expansion of consciousness. And that expanded consciousness is imbued with compassion and pure life and pure love. And when we live that fully, every day, consciously, with divine intent, then we become anointed by God. We each become a Messiah, part of the Son of Mankind collective Messiah, which is the second Adam, as Paul called it, or the new humanity, as Bishop Kaiser, our presiding bishop, has coined the term. But it is a communion of saints that is a catalyst for positive divine change both in humanity and in the world, guided by the Abba, our Father, Mother, God. So the Messianic age had begun when Jesus made his proclamation, but the collective Messiah was just beginning to come into being, at least in Mass. What's important to understand is that all of the translations of the Beatitudes that exist are incorrect. They're incorrect. They were not the words that Jesus spoke. The original Hebrew-Aramaic terms, words that Jesus would have used, were written in what is called the prophetic perfect tense. This Matthean version of the Beatitudes are more true to the Aramaic core, the Hebrew-Aramaic core, than the Lucan version. So the Matthean version is more historical in how it's expressed. The words of Jesus, the proposed words of Jesus. So in Hellenistic Galilean Hebrew-Aramaic, which was the language Jesus spoke, there was no past tense and there was no future tense. There was only perfect or imperfect tenses. And Matthew, as well as all of the other canonical Gospels, were written in Greek. And Greek was much different than this Hellenistic Galilean Hebrew-Aramaic. It was much different because it had past, present, and future tenses, much like our English language does, which contributed greatly to the misunderstanding and contortions of Jesus's probably historical teachings encapsulated in these Beatitudes. This problem with making Jesus speak with future tenses often distorted the teachings and created this wrong eschatological teaching of Jesus about the end of the world. Jesus was not a pessimist. He had a very optimistic viewpoint of what the coming Messiah would do. He felt that it wouldn't be the end of the world. Perhaps it was the end of the world as we knew it, with all of its limitations, with all of its negativities, with its inherent selfishness. Perhaps it was an end to the world in that sense, but it was not a cataclysmic destruction of the world and there be raising of dead bodies from the ground. I mean, we've had many, many classes. Please look at them on Facebook or on YouTube. He was very positive. He predicted that each soul could evolve spiritually, could become positive, can become a source of positive change in this world while in the body, and even more so when we transition from this body to higher spiritual realities, where the communion of saints does exist. But due to the fact that we made Jesus Greek instead of Jewish, we made him a Greek speaker that spoke much differently than Jesus could ever speak, because he didn't speak with a future tense. So he wouldn't ever speak of an impending future doom, an impending future judgment. He couldn't speak that way because he didn't speak Greek. The unfortunate thing about the Beatitudes is that they were translated. They were written in Greek and then translated into English, giving wrong verb tenses and hence a wrong understanding of the Beatitudes. Let's look at the next Beatitude. So Beatitude number 2 comes from Matthew 5:4. It is written in most English translations, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." A better understanding is, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they are being comforted." So, and it's just a slight change of idea here, but for some of these prophecies, it becomes very important and very changing in context. So here in the first version, listed above the citation from the New Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha, this is what most translations in English read: "They will be comforted." Jesus could not speak in a future tense because there was no future tense in the Hebrew-Aramaic that he spoke. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they are being comforted." The prophetic perfect tense means that Jesus, when he spoke these words, he already saw it happening. The Olam Haba is the world to come, or the world that is coming into being. So Jesus, as a Jewish prophet, saw that those who are oppressed spiritually, they are being comforted because they have spiritually transformed themselves, because they have done the way of the Torah, because they have walked Mar Yeshua, the Master Jesus' halakha. They have become spiritually reborn, and they are being comforted because they have inherited the Malkuth, and they are now a part of the Son of Mankind collective Messiah. They have every comfort because they know their union with God. They no longer are suffering due to a separation, a perceived separation from God. They realize that God is not absent, but that God is immanent and is in every molecule of space around us. So when Jesus says the Beatitudes, he is having a prophetic vision. And that vision, which is in the future, is happening right now for him. He is seeing the Son of Mankind Messiah, this collective communion of saints, coming into being, changing humanity, birthing the second Adam, birthing a new humanity. So we mentioned in part 7 of this series that the Beatitudes were informed by the Essenes, an available Jewish Haggadah. Matthew 5:4 has clear ties to the Thanksgiving scroll, which is part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is Essene literature, which reads, "I am thankful, essentially, to have God anoint me in thy truth, a messenger of the peace of thy goodness, to proclaim to the faithful ones meek, which we'll see in the next beatitude, the multitude of thy mercies. And to them that are contrite in spirit, that was the first beatitude we did last time, thy salvation. And to them that mourn, eternal joy. So we see that the first three beatitudes of Jesus, blessed are those who are contrite in spirit, blah, blah, blah. Blessed are those who mourn. And the next one are blessed are those who are meek. All three of these ideas were not original to Mar Yeshua. He got it from the Dead Sea Scrolls. In other words, his teachings were informed by the Essenes. It cannot be denied through biblical scholarship. It was not something original to Jesus. Jesus had been taught this, he had read this, he had studied this, and he apparently agreed with it, at least this part of Essene spiritual belief and practice, because he was teaching it to his disciples. He was proclaiming it in Davarim, or prophetic verses, to his disciples. But these ideas were definitely not original to Jesus. And it shows that during those missing years of Jesus, at least part of that time was spent studying Essene literature, particularly what comes from this Thanksgiving scroll, because he's quoting it. And many biblical scholars believe that John the Baptist, who was the apparent teacher of Jesus, the apparent initiator, the baptizer of Jesus, many believe that he was an Essene. Not all biblical scholars agree on that or can confirm that, because there's not that much about John the Baptist in the canonical Gospels, because they were trying to minimize the importance of John the Baptist, who was a huge prophet, a revolutionary prophet in Jewish history. But they were trying to minimize John, so they gave us just a little glimpse of who John was, because they wanted to magnify Jesus, the Christ, right? Eclipsing John, his teacher. And whatever greatness a student has comes from the clarity of the teachings received by their master, by their Rav. So, I too cannot confirm that John the Baptist was an Essene, but I can confirm by looking at the Thanksgiving scroll and then reading Jesus' first three Beatitudes that Jesus definitely studied Essene literature, whether it was with John the Baptist or not with John the Baptist. I'm not saying that Jesus agreed with all Essene ideas. He definitely did not. The Essenes did believe in a cataclysmic end of the world. They believed it was all coming to the end, and they also proclaimed what seems to be a Davidic Messiah, as well as other Messiah ideas, messianic expectations. And Jesus did not expect the Davidic Messiah, as we've taught many times and proved many times. So the fact that the first three of Jesus' Beatitudes are quoted verbatim in the Thanksgiving scroll are not a coincidence. Jesus definitely had ties with the Essenes. Maybe he learned with the Essenes and he accepted some of those ideas and then developed his own ideas about an optimistic messianic expectation. The Son of Mankind collective Messiah, this anointed second Adam. Not just that one divine being would come down from the clouds and save all of humanity, but that humanity would ultimately save itself by choosing a better way, a positive way, a loving way, a compassionate way. This was the path of Jesus. And these ideas of the communion of saints, this Son of Mankind collective Messiah, Jesus collected these ideas from sources like Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, Trito, and Deutero-Isaiah were formative in his understanding of Messiah. Also, the Book of Daniel quite literally describes the Son of Mankind collected Messiah. It's just greatly distorted in Christianity. But when you read Jewish commentary, they've always expected one of their messianic expectations that they always expected, which is rooted in the Book of Daniel, is this collective Messiah, this corporate Messiah of an anointed, growing body of humanity that would help to transform humanity that was still stuck in the first Adam and would help to evolve the earth. So Jesus developed that idea from those Jewish people developing ideas in the Babylonian exile. And the literature that was developed in the Babylonian exile that influenced Jesus' idea of this communal, collective, corporate Messiah was the Book of Isaiah, particularly Deutero and Trito Isaiah, the Book of Daniel, and the intertestamental works of the Book of Enoch, which we'll see even today, how Jesus was influenced by the Book of Enoch. So, blessed are those who mourn. Those who mourn are those who are spiritually oppressed. We have to understand that even in Jesus' time, although Judaism was a legal religion within the Roman Empire, they were still oppressed. They were still servants of the Roman Empire. So those who mourn are those who are spiritually oppressed. And the Jewish people were constantly, throughout ancient history, being taken over, enslaved, destroyed, slayed by neighboring empires. I mean, the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. They swept through, destroyed Jerusalem, crushed the first temple, and they put all the Jews in exile in the Babylonian Empire. So they mourned because they were taken out of their land. Their temple was destroyed. And then eventually the Persian Empire defeated the Babylonian or Assyrian Empire, and Cyrus the Great gave permission to the Jewish people to go back to Jerusalem and build a second temple. And that second temple, Jesus predicted, would fall. And it did, because the Romans came and destroyed the second temple. And then and that was in 70 AD. And that ended temple worship for Jews up to this day. Some Jews do expect the building of a third temple, but it's never happened. So those who are mourn are those who are spiritually oppressed, those that have been forcibly removed from their land, those who are not allowed to practice their Jewish religion as they would like to practice it. Also, in the time of Jesus, it didn't refer just to those historical ideas and the current occupancy of the Roman Empire. It spoke to the Amaha-Aretz, the people of the land. Amaha-Aretz, they often were not included in temple worship. They were often ignored by the Pharisees and Sadducees. They were poor. They were considered to have spiritual debt, or what we call negative karma, that they were poor because they didn't follow the way of God, that they were diseased because they didn't follow the way of God. All these unfortunate things that happened to the Amaha-Aretz were their fault, according to the very privileged and rich Pharisees and Sadducees. So the Amaha-Aretz, they really didn't participate much in temple worship, unless it was a major festival that maybe they'd go and they would offer something to be sacrificed. So Jesus came for these suffering people. He didn't come for the Pharisees and Sadducees. He criticized Pharisees and Sadducees. He came for the people of the land. He came to lift up those who were mourning, because their own spiritual leadership ignored them and ostracized them. So those who mourn are the Amaha'arets that came to Jesus to hear him. And they actually wanted to do the Torah. They wanted to find the heart of Torah so that they can purify their hearts. These people who mourned, who are spiritually oppressed by their own spiritual leadership, who Jesus castigates later in the Gospel of Matthew, They were mourning because the keys of heaven, which the Pharisees and Sadducees had purportedly, were being kept away from them. So they were spiritually oppressed, not just by the Roman occupancy, but by their own Jewish temple establishment leadership. So Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, who are spiritually oppressed, who are the Amaha'arets, for I see them being comforted, because they are being anointed by God as part of the communion of saints." So this beatitude, blessed are those who mourn, it shows not only the Essene influence on Jesus' teachings, but that of the prophet Isaiah. So we have a reading here from Trito Isaiah, and Trito Isaiah is one of the bases for Jesus' development of the idea of this collective corporate Messiah. Isaiah 62, 1 through 3 reads, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who mourn in Zion, to give them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a faint spirit." So we see Jesus merely quoting the Thanksgiving scroll about blessed are those who mourn. And you see the flavor of this beatitude in this reading from Isaiah. So we see a lot of influences coming together that Jesus collected, and then he developed his own halakha based on these sources that he respected or found resonance with. So beatitude number 3, Matthew 5:5, it is often translated as, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." The better understanding is, "Blessed are the faithful, for they are inheriting the earth." There is no meek person, no shy person that will ever attain the Malkuth of God. Real spiritual seekers of Jesus are not lambs, they are lions. You have to be strong, you have to be determined, and you have to be self-confident to progress on Jesus' spiritual path. You have to be willing to do. To be blessed are the faithful means blessed are those that have faithfulness, that have fidelity to the way of the God, which means that you are doing Torah, that you are doing Jesus' halakha, which is his interpretation and enactment of the Torah. So to be faithful to the way of God means that you are doing the way of God. It had very little, if anything, to do with belief in God. God was self-evident to the Jewish people, including Jesus. So to be faithful to God wasn't to believe in God, it was to do what God told us to do in the Torah. It's in doing that we become spiritually purified in mind and heart. What you believe will never save you. What you believe will never change one negative tendency in your mind, one negative thought, and it will never change any action that you do in the world that's negative. It is the spiritual things that you do consistently with divine spiritual intent that will cause spiritual transformation, which is a purification of the heart and mind, which it makes you eligible for spiritual rebirth, to be anointed a Messiah, an individual Messiah, as part of the collective Son of Mankind Messiah, which is to say the second Adam that Paul proclaimed. As my living spiritual master says, she says to all of her disciples, you are not kittens. You are not meek. You are divine lions. So I tell all of you, stand up. Be a divine lion. Do the way of Jesus. Become anointed. And step into your divine power, into your divine union with the Abba. The Hebrew word for meek was anavim, which was a designation for those who are faithful or saintly and that were afflicted with injustice. As we've already talked about interpretations of how the Jewish people before Jesus and during the time of Jesus faced injustice. So to be faithful was to do the way of God, to do and embody the Torah. Anavim, like Abionim from the first Beatitude, Abionim meaning the poor, was a name adopted by the Essenes to describe a faithful member of their group, a saintly member of their group. It is seen in literature such as the Hebrew Testament, apocalyptic literature, and Jewish Midrash. So it is evident that both the Book of Enoch and Psalms also likely influenced this beatitude of Jesus. Let's check it out. So in Psalms, we see Psalms 37:11. But the meek, the anavim, the faithful, shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant prosperity. So it's apparent that Jesus knew this psalm and that it informed this davar that he spoke, this prophetic utterance that he spoke. Blessed are those who mourn, etc. So in Matthew 6:33, Jesus says that to those who seek God first, are faithful to the way of God outlined in Torah, in his interpretation of Torah, all things shall be added unto them. So here, we're getting a very specific teaching and prophetic vision of Jesus. Those that are faithful to the way of God will not only have spiritual progress, but they will attain what they need materially. Remember that Jesus was speaking to the Haaretz, who were the poor. So Jesus was saying, he was teaching to them, if you follow the way of God, God will protect and support you. If you truly do the way of God, make teshuvah to God, return to the way of God and embody the teachings of Torah in thought, word, and deed, then God will support you. You don't even need to ask for it. Because when you do the way of God that I, Jesus, teach, God sees you as a child and wants to give you everything you need to be happy, supported, nurtured. So Jesus was saying prophetically in a vision that he sees the Haaretz being comforted because they are truly seeking God. They are truly trying to do the way of God, the heart, not the letter of the law, but they want to do the core, the heart teachings of Torah. And by focusing on this, they will attain their needs on earth. They'll become anointed while embodying the teachings of Torah on earth. And then once they leave and transition from this body, they'll become part of the communion of saints in the Olamim, the heavens. So Jesus was definitely influenced by the Book of Enoch, the intertestamental literature of the Book of Enoch. In Book of Enoch, chapter 5, we see, "And for all of you sinners there shall be no salvation, but on you all shall abide a curse. But for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth." So who are the elect? Special people elected by God for prosperity, both spiritual and material? No. Throughout Christianity, both in Catholicism and Protestantism and evangelical sects, they try to say that the elect are people that were predestined by God to be God's people and to go into heaven. And those that God didn't choose, they wouldn't follow the way of Jesus or believe in Jesus, blah, 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 and they'd go to hell. Tough luck, guys. If God is our Abba, which means our father and mother in one, why would he reject any of us? The elect are not special people elected by God for prosperity, both spiritual and material. Emphatically no. The elect are those who elected or chose to be faithful to or to do the way of God, the Torah. And when they do the way of God, they are called anavim, which means faithful. Anavim was incorrectly translated as meek. A faithful person is anything but meek, is anything but weak. They are divine lions of Judah. That's why Jesus is called the Lion of Judah. He is not a lamb. He was power incarnate, divine confidence incarnate, because he embodied the way of God in thought, word, and deed. He himself purified himself and became the firstborn of the collective Messiah. And he said, all of you follow me, halkani, follow my way. And you too can attain the same beatitude, divine blessing from God. And if you seek God first faithfully, you'll inherit the earth, meaning you'll have whatever you need. He's not talking about inheriting some piece of land. He's saying you'll have clothes, you'll have food, you'll have resources, you'll have what you need to be comfortable while living in this world. And finally, when you leave this body in union with God consciousness, you will ascend and merge into the communion of saints, from where you attain Malkuth, the sovereignty of God. You share in the co-sovereignty of God so that you then have the spiritual work of helping God spiritually evolve all of humanity, to help each person, not leaving one behind, no matter how many lifetimes it takes. The communion of saints works with Mar Yeshua and God to evolve every human, lifting them and transforming them positively from the first Adam to the second Adam, which is the Son of Mankind, collective Messiah. Let's continue with the Liturgy of the Chalice.